I can do all things through him who gives me strength. I can't think of a more common verse I've heard recently, or frankly, a verse that is more misapplied. Often, as I hear that verse and I hear people say that, they usually mean something like, as I set my agenda, as I figure out what I want to do in life, and if it gets hard, if it gets difficult, that God's going to give me power and strength to get that job that I always wanted, or to finally overcome this health concern, or to finally have that relationship I was after. But the frank part of this is it's much more profound than that. More miraculous, and we're going to look at that this morning because we've been doing this series on the Ten Commandments that we're calling Values That Build Strong Families. And as we do it, the reason we talk about it as families, because in many ways as families, I mean, we can have rules and things that, the way things operate in our house. This is how we do things, this is how we don't. But in many ways, who we are as a family is really built by just identity formation. This is the kind of thing we do. This is what's normal. This is what we expect out of one another. It's not that we always succeed, but this is what it means to be one of us. And God is doing that very thing with the people of Israel, who had been in slavery in Egypt for generations. They are going to form a new nation, a new tribe. They're going to be these Israelites, and they are going to figure out who they are that's different and apart from, frankly, everybody else in the world. And so they're setting this up, and they're talking about the things, and God sets these 10 commandments, and, well, we're going to finish with number 10 today. By the way, did anybody get all 10 of them in order? Yeah. Naomi, who was singing the song, and Amy, who cheats. Congratulations. At least you're not lying. That's right. I don't see no cheating on there, right? Okay. Let's look at number 10. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. To covet, the idea of coveting. So when we're talking about coveting, what is that? I mean, is it the idea of wanting? I mean, it's kind of that on steroids, but there's nothing wrong with wanting. There's nothing wrong with this idea that I desire something, or even that I'm ambitiously pursuing that. That's not what coveting is either. It's not to say that there is something or I long for something. There is this hint in this commandment that it's very much about, this comparison and looking at what somebody else has and longing, if not for the same thing, then maybe even as much as longing for their specific one to take it from them. But this idea of coveting is, well, really, in many ways, it's disordered love. And what I mean by that is Augustine, a theologian in the 5th century, is talking a lot about this idea of things should go in order, that we should have different things. So I can say something like, I love pizza, and I love my wife, and I love this church, and I love God. And all those can be true, but I better get them in the right order, right? There needs to be a very specific order. That in many ways we're talking about prioritizing. So to really want something and to go after it, and especially to take it from someone else, is to put that stuff out of order, to prize maybe a house or a relationship or a servant or something, to put that more than you care about these other things. And so it's not, that pursuit, it's disordered. In many ways, you might be, for those of you who've been with us for this entire series, you might realize that by kind of claiming that, I'm actually reiterating some stuff we talked about with the very first commandment. That God is to be first, that we are to love God more than anything, that actively having him first and prioritized in our life. And it is. In fact, what's fascinating is about the order of the Ten Commandments. And as we looked at that, we put number one, the idea that you love God first. It's all about our theology. It's all about primacy and the foundation of living and what it means to be followers of God. Then in, 2 and 3 are very much about how we worship God. Number 4 is a little bit about worship, but our rest as well. But then he starts dealing with just the stuff of life. We're talking about how families operate, the very basis of life itself, how marriages are to work. He talks about the idea of property rights and even truth. This is the one that gets on the inside. I mean, I guess some of the others are too, but this is almost more psychological. I mean, it's deeper than psychological. There's more going on here, but we're really dealing with it. Now, what we've been doing in each of the for each of these commandments is we've gone to other places in Scripture where it expounds a little bit more on it and puts it in, especially in the positive, because in many ways, is God saying, do not covet. He's telling us not to, but that it's also ushering us into doing something positive. And what I believe the opposite of coveting is contentment. And so let's go to a famous passage in Philippians 4, where we'll read that verse, and among other things, here starting in verse 10. Now, Paul, as he's writing this, by the way, I just want to set the context. The church there in Philippi had given him money so that he could go and continue to do ministry, and he was talking about that and thanking them. And he says, I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I am not saying this because I am in need. For I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. It's interesting that I say all things when the passage is very clearly talking about this specifically. Let me break this down, and you can follow along in your sermon outline when we're talking about the idea of contentment. And some things we learn from this passage, which would be the exact opposite of coveting. Contentment. To be in that place that just says, I'm okay. That there's a sense of peace. I think we long for it. I think each and every one of us would love to be in that place of contentment, to be in that place of kind of peace and quiet in our soul, the difference between a frantic desire and a drivenness to take from others or to have for ourselves. Well, what this passage tells us, first of all, is contentment is a secret. And now when Paul says, I've learned the secret to being content, I don't think he means that it's a secret in the sense that I'm not allowed to tell you, but a secret in the sense that it's not obvious what gets us to contentment. And I think that is actually the very first problem we have in looking at the idea of contentment or the idea of not coveting, that as we look at it, the very first problem we run into is the fact that it's a secret. It's not obvious because we often, and certainly our culture teaches this, we do think it's obvious. We know exactly what would bring contentment. If I could just get all the things that I want, I will be content. That's all I need, just somehow. Somebody provide it for me. Somebody give it to me. If I can't earn it myself, then somebody else needs to take care of me, or the government needs to give it to me, or God himself. If he can just give me all the things that I want, then I would be content. I mean, I could be rich. I'd be content. If I could be famous, if I could be powerful, then I have contentment. I wouldn't have to worry. It would be great. Now, of course, none of us say that. None of us are going to say it out loud because we realize, okay, that sounds ridiculous. So I will still believe that if I could just have everything I want, that I would be content, but I'll just define it down. I don't really need to be rich and famous and powerful. I just kind of moderated that. I don't need to be rich. I just need enough to pay my bills and a little bit left over. Then I would be content. Or if I had just really good reputation and connection with in social circles, I had a pretty full appointment calendar with people that wanted to hang out with me. Or maybe if I just had, if I could have whatever health problems and things that are going on and just could and have agency and be able to define my own destiny and make my own choices and have my own freedom. The thing is whether we're setting really lofty goals or much more moderate ones, the truth is it's never going to be enough. The idea of coveting, the issue of contentment, is that it will never be enough. Because it's not really about that. It's not about the thing. It's not about, can I have what I want? Can I have what it's not what I want. It's what I need. I'm really good at redefining the stuff that I want as rights or needs. And I'll call it that. And if I could just have that, then I can do it. But it's never about that. And here's how you can tell. It mentions it in the passage because contentment is not only a secret, it's discovered in plenty and want. Now, what I mean by that is not that it's necessarily if you get to a place of huge need or where you have everything you want that you are automatically going to discover contentment. But in the way that false contentment shows itself in those two areas. Now, let's deal with the first one because that's kind of easy, right? If I am to a place where I don't have, I am in want, I am hungry, I'm not able to have these dreams. Basically, that's what it is, right? When I get to a place of crushed dreams, then I know that that the fact that this will never happen sets me on a place of realizing that I'm never going to have enough. I will never be content. I will never be happy. Because I don't have it. Let me give you an example. There's this guy, Thomas Kelly. I love one of his writings, A Testament of Devotion. He wrote this, but after this event, he was an academic. He's a really smart guy and a writer, and he really pursued it. And one of the times he's going for a PhD. It might have even been his second, if I remember right. But he's going for a PhD with Harvard, and he writes his dissertation. He gets a lot of praise for it, in fact. And then as he goes to defend it, for those of you who don't know, you have to go in front of a committee, and they ask you questions, and you have to defend your dissertation and this kind of thing. And so as he's doing that, apparently he has this memory lapse. He has a struggle. He's not able to do it to their satisfaction. So Harvard tells him, no, not only did you fail at your dissertation defense, we will not be giving you a second chance. And it crushed him. This was in 1937. He was absolutely crushed. He's like everything that he had stalked and put his identity in, everything that he had been striving for, the stuff that he had been pushing, all of a sudden it comes crashing down around him. That he's not able to see a way forward. His son later writes about this story, and he says there's no exact record of what happened in the following weeks. He says, but it is certain that sometime during the months of November or December 1937, a change was wrought within the very foundation of his soul. He described it as being shaken by the experience of presence, something I did not seek but that sought me. Stripped of his defenses and human self-justification, he found, for the first time, a readiness to accept the outright gift of God's love. And he responded with unlimited commitment to that leading. Now, the thing is I love where this went, and we will talk about that in a second, but I want you to capture this idea of what happened there, that as he got to this place of total defensiveness, human self-justification, whether he could accept that or not, that deep, dark place, I think we can understand it. And in that place, we see that whatever we've put our contentment, our goals, our things into, if it fails us, it can devastate us. And we realize that we didn't have true contentment at all. The second, though, is in places of plenty. You know, the idea that somebody who is rich and famous, powerful, somebody who seems to have on the outside things that we long for, they had some goals, they had some dreams, and they've reached the top and that's been found wanting. We hear that story all the time. Whether it's an actor of a world-famous syndication sitcom that decides to overdose intentionally or otherwise, but just lives a life of drug abuse because it wasn't contenting. It wasn't contentful. It wasn't enough for him. Or the singer of a grunge band that is hitting the top of the charts that decides he can't live anymore. And you know, we look at people who seem to have it all, and in many ways we set them up for failure because they can't really announce that they don't have anything. Because what are they going to say? You know, oh, I know I'm rich, I know I'm famous, I know I have all this stuff, but my life still is horrible. And all the rest of us go, oh, it must be so hard. Oh, that must be tough for you. You know, because we are still caught in that place of thinking contentment would be if we had what they had. We still imagine that would be it. We would finally arrive. And not that all those things bring happiness, but those are the barriers that really just keep me away, because I'll bring all this really good stuff that I am into that place of being rich and famous, and then I'll be content. So what do we do? The thing is we're in kind of a trap, because some of us will spend years, if not decades, maybe our entire lives, still pursuing, if I could just get that thing, then I'll have it. Then I'll be content. We never hit the top, so that we never know that it's not enough, and we're not sunk so low and destroyed so much that we think we can never get it, because we've convinced ourselves, no, if I can just conceive it and believe it, I'll achieve it, and then I'll get it. And we imagine this, we've been told this, and so we're caught in this middle ground and never realizing, or taking forever to realize, forever to mature, to realize this world and this stuff is not going to get us to be happy. It's not going to have us be content. We don't have necessarily the blessing of really understanding plenty or want. But if we can get there, we only really have a few choices of how we respond to this. Because ultimately, contentment is learned. Paul says, I have learned the secret. It didn't just dawn on him one day and all of a sudden he's got it. It wasn't handed to him. It has been a process that he has to learn, that making some decisions, making some choices about life to move forward. And when you are confronted with the fact that all your struggles, all the things going on, all the stuff, and your desire to seek after this next whatever, that's not going to do it for you, then you really only have four choices. I've taken these from Tim Keller. He actually used to, at his church, he had a little pamphlet where he mentioned these four things, that this is really your only choices when you confront that reality. The first is you can just blame the things. You can just blame the things. Okay, right. I wanted this relationship, and I've gotten married, and now I don't have it all, so clearly the problem is I need a better spouse. Or I've ran up this corporate ladder, I've got to the top, and who knew that this place would be that miserable? It's not giving me what I want. I clearly need a better career. I've lived my life, and not everybody applauds me, so I need a new identity. I need a new whatever. I need to be this new person, and maybe a new gender or a new whatever, and then finally I will find that contentment and be happy. I'll need a new name. I just need better friends. Really, what's going on is all these people, or a new place to live, all the people around me are just insufferable, and I have horrible neighbor. And people that do this, that get to the place of just blaming things, are going to be on this constant path of constant change and chaos, trying to move to the next thing. Well, maybe this will do it, and maybe this will do it. And we see people like that are never seemingly satisfied, running from thing to thing to thing, hoping the next thing they chase is going to be that shiny whatever that's going to solve all their problems, and they just keep at it and realize every time they grab it, it just wasn't enough until we mature. Until we mature and realize that's not going to happen. But we can go from blaming things to a much more popular one in the Portland area here, and we can just blame ourselves. There must be something wrong with me. It must be my issues, my neurodivergence. It must be my anxiety. It must be the fact that I am melancholy. The fact that my wires are crossed. My dopamine receptors. There's something wrong with me that just keeps me from being content. And I'm the problem. I wonder how much in our very prosperous country, now that we are in the most prosperous times in history, and we see mental health issues increasing dramatically more than any other time in history, how much of that is because of the fact that we're believing that that's what I need to do. I'm just blaming myself. And it's so seductive. It's so seductive. You know why? Because if you decide, okay, I need to go investigate. I need to investigate my life, what's wrong with me and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to go see a therapist. I'm going to go talk to somebody. I'm going to do that stuff. And you begin to do that. And the thing is chances are you will discover something wrong with you. I mean, chances are that there's something that, some past trauma, some struggles that you have that legitimately could be helped with therapy and that kind of stuff and those kind of things, but they become red herrings. And what I mean is not that we shouldn't work on them. I think that's great. I think you can. I think that's really helpful and can make life a lot easier, but it's not going to solve the central problem because it can't. It just can't. Ernst Becker, who wrote in the 70s, talking about the field, well, not just psychology, it was a subset, he was just talking science in general. He wasn't a Christian as far as I know, but he made this case that I think just speaks to this well. He says, the modern scientific enterprise has been one of the most powerful instruments of this whole historical process of secularization and the demythologizing of the world. Here's what it means. It seemed to promise man a new kind of control over his destiny, a new kind of godlike power and knowledge, and yet, ironically, the modern scientific enterprise becomes a new mythology when it claims to deliver man from his fundamental anxiety, a task it can never fulfill. Science can give man knowledge of the world, techniques to manipulate it, but it cannot give him what he most desperately needs: a secure place in the cosmos, an ultimate meaning to his life that transcends the terror of death and the chaos of nature. The more science succeeds in its own terms, the more it reveals the indifference of the universe, and thus the more it undermines its own pretensions to ultimate salvation. We've got a world that's going to tell you, if you can just fix this about you and you can do this, and if we hit this new technological process, then we will evolve to a place of human flourishing and you will just automatically be content. But there is nothing that psychology, it can't point you to ultimate meaning. It can maybe give you some techniques to deal with struggles. It can do that. It's all good stuff, but it can't be the answer for you. There is no scientific evidence that you matter. There is no scientific evidence that humans matter. That has to come from some other place. And if we think we're going to get it through some scientific inquiry, then we're treating science as a religion. So there's a third option. We could just blame the universe. We could just blame the universe. Meaning that I'm just going to give up. You know what? That's never going to work. Nothing's ever good. I'm not going to think about it anymore. I'm just going to be done. And you know what? Anybody who has these pipe dreams that there is meaning and contentment, I mean, they're just stupid. And I'm not going to be stupid, so I'm going to hide and harden my heart. I'm going to keep myself, I'm going to try to cut off that human aspect of me that really does long for something more, that wants this idea of contentment. I'm just going to just be okay, and I'm going to harden myself and become less human because there's just no way this could happen. I think really those are our only options, apart from this fourth one that, obviously by how I'm constructing this, is the one I'm going to advocate. And the fourth is we could blame our relationship with God. Meaning that as I suffer this point of discontentment, maybe my dreams got crushed around me and now I'm discontent, or I finally have achieved some level. I finally, I don't know, hit retirement or hit this age that I always wanted to be, or finally finished school, or finally got that job, and I'm still not satisfied. That maybe instead of trying to blame these things and chase the next thing, or say there's something wrong with me, I just never allowed to be happy, or blame the universe that it's never going to happen, maybe I begin to question, maybe I've not as close to God as I could be, as I should be. This is where that verse comes. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. The answer is that our connection with Christ is what can bring us contentment. When we rest in the knowledge of the truth of who God says we are, that we do have meaning, that we do matter, that life matters because God has made it and created it and put us here in this time, in this place, and that we, in our place in the kingdom of God, can find that contentment. Now, we're going to struggle because none of us really have this perfect relationship with Christ, at least not here on earth. But every amount of discontent we have, every amount of covetousness we have, when we look at somebody else's life and go, man, they have the good life. If I had that, then I would be okay. As soon as we see that, we should realize that our real problem is our relationship with God. That if we can get these things properly ordered, where God is indeed first, where I long more to be with him than anything else, and then all these other things, my spouse and my church and pizza, that they all fall in order, and they can be good, but they have to be in that order. Because the disordered will never work. I mentioned this idea of ordered love that came from Augustine. Well, in his book, Confessions, probably one of the two most famous works that he ever wrote, it just starts off with, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." We will always be restless and discontent unless we're willing to rest in the Lord. Now, I believe this is the best way forward. But I want to speak to those who may be on number 3 instead of blaming the universe. Say, why is there any imagination that that's even possible? I mean, maybe I'm willing to buy that it'll never be enough. Maybe I'm willing to even set aside that maybe I'm not that broken that I couldn't get it. I don't know, maybe I'm not willing to put that aside. Or maybe I have and I've just hardened my heart, whatever, and just realized it's never going to happen. Is there any evidence that there is a God who longs and will work and allow us to rest in him? Well, I just don't know if I can preach anymore without quoting C.S. Lewis. So I'm going to do it again. This is from his most famous work, Mere Christianity, where he's talking about the idea of hope. This hope for contentment and meaning. And he says, creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exist. A baby feels hunger. Well, there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there is such a thing as water. Men feel sexual desire. Well, there is such a thing as sex. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. If none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, that does not prove the universe is a fraud. Probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it, to suggest the real thing. If that is so, I must take care, on the one hand, never to despise or to be unthankful for these earthly blessings, and on the other hand, never to mistake them for the something else of which they are only a kind of copy, an echo, a mirage. You hear those two things in there? One, all the things we long for, all that longing, it's evidence in and of itself that there must be something that meets it, that we were built with this longing for contentment and connection with God. We are built for it. And these other things that we find pleasure in the world that God created and we can find joy in are really just echoes of this deeper reality of focusing first on Christ. My prayer is that we find it. Let's pray. Lord, I often think about how I was told that the way we start a relationship with you and the way that we grow a relationship with you is really the same thing. And it's only possible because you first gave to us. That you have built us in your image. You have called us to Eden. And when we despised it and went our own way, you gave us your Son to die on the cross to redeem the lost, that we can opt out of the system of, I've just got to be perfect to earn this, but instead that I can just go to you. In all my brokenness and all my messed upness, in all the craziness and brokenness of this universe, that I want to pray, if for the first time, I will pray, Lord, forgive me. I choose you. Help me to order my life with you first and these other things there. I want to thank you for the blessings. But every moment of discontent, I want to announce right here, right now, that I believe it's because I have yet to fully grasp what it means to rest in you. And Lord, if I've prayed that once before, I've prayed it 1 billion times before. Because really every other moment of dissatisfaction, of coveting, of brokenness really comes to that same place. I need more of you. And I don't think you're the one withholding. Lord, help me to focus better, to learn the secret of contentment, to learn the secret of connecting to you. And I can do this through you who will give me the strength. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, let's have a few moments of open worship. If God put something on your heart, by all means, you can share that and I'll close us.